I want to remind each one of ourselves here to take a moment and cultivate the highest form of motivation. We call it Sem or bodhicitta motivation. That is altruistic mind of enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. We should at least try to cultivate that kind of bodhicitta motivation through contrived effort and participate in this Lamrim discourse on the stage of the path to enlightenment by Manjushri Lama Tsongkhapa. In order to give you the blessing of lineage masters in transmission oral, allow me to read about page 2 from this Lamrim Chemo, the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, volume number 3 in the English translation, page 210, followed by explication.
Rabji niruwe sanjura diyan dere mewa ji itiba shen bo lo shungu je tong tang ba lo jo bo ne xie xin na ta che je nidu ji shungu je tong tang ba lan jo ba tun che dere xie wa ma ri ba ri be yang si che xie so je de xie rabji ni tun be sam yo de dere mewa ta je nidu ye te ba da tun be do te da ta do te ta de ne ta ye na ba xie xie大约那么没事吧，等这个这些问题别的呢，什些，写说送吧，那么那边上一讲言啦，真这当不么日吧，当么日吧，我不让心着吧那些吧，你让拉呀些些的没多把那些把事了，你让拉些些的没。到些把事了，老天那年让了些些当没到被这些全部你些些当这样了，真是，马上把今晚就完的把那些把些下把了，到被通行了的，天天的这个把些是别到把我到把看人当些那些把我些现在让个我这把中到被到把人的地这把了。到把那样大把马人别个让西街东找到把的些东西，这样你们讲些嘛是把些问题，对我娘的看到当这个有人变过把对吧呢？什么一人嘛呀，大把我的大马人那说是结我了的话那也。同我的这位东把你这东到把没别这边他把没了我到把看你当些这月了这边那我你些这月特别老些人心老些老些人心就找到把他不就说对的那两个人的啥啥子让代表到我没把了就是个我没熊那就就是老说把西把他토메데 저데 시자바에 다니 냥다 지르시 도미 동다라 동메디 로데 냥에 멘다와 디제자바나 저서시 선베소 ngara시 마릭베 ngara시 마리베 진당 지비 시위디니 네메 신이 시르르 샤네와 장당마 예제대바 오보모보나 체브르 테마시 조다바 엉 주대 엉게 샤바 타제네 마리 비디나지베 유대예 수조원 자와시베 조바타 타다바 도바제베 셰르 젠지데레 제제 마리 비시 고제 자와시베 자이 군다 주다 뭐 바시 개베 따바 자와 발라 흐르롱 메샤데데 가자고 보니 샤와 샤웨 풍네 제바 мен제 가자데 유제지 로도데스 로도 심제 코라 시원 동네메티 동네티 유수 점바이라 심제다 제 코와 시원네 리제지 머르바이 비셔도 군다지 머르바네 주다 모도다 코나라이 그래서 메데베제로 딜랑에 범미게 체바라 녀바 신도 계셔와 되다 가르지 로도 탈도 보네 연라 중에 동bol린지 마리바인라 군다지 가차남장 경아마의 시리시에네 조도바거나 이메나 ang시라서 바 도미지베 시비벤즈나 탄지니 너야 리베스인지 마면 디세르 리베지나 수요샤웨 로니베 이시도바거나 당대 다즈즈마니 삼 다다가다가 베베 유라샤바도다 도바나 인지베 도바거인 담제라미쇼 오늘 머리바디랑 힘을 줘도베지 지다시 인야나야 제르로문디 쇼니 군소저르 집에 도nom라야 랑신남 랑신남 랑기 무시보라세 타인제 바몽드 낭낭 데르네 가자 가면 쉬어가용 르메유나 로양게 샤바면 바라 쉬테나라랑 랑기 네츠람 디올로지가 여반자 바반디 라바티 시더스노 디 시더 신이 쉐나이라지 라체랑 지바랑 그 두델라네 다가나 시시에 다바타중그 고니 무슨 와샤디인디 구노 메바데 테나다네 마이 시비 시제베 제벌레 데나 랑 강랑게 모다나 신당 랑완 당 신라라 마르바 니 예모들라니 셰드다 남정 소소바다로 데라 신라라 말레시바니 유진라라 말레바 마인지 유진 타니베 시발라 신시 자데 디 옹기샤바이 멤베 신라라 말레바오 데나 랑와시 자데 유데다 랑랑기 네로 삼 네로 섬 둘로 토모마이베 고 티니라 랑기 고 랑기라이 샤오 랑기라이 데야 페나 타바다 두르 타바디 두디기 로잉니 시다 타바디 샤니 시다 타바디 샤니 두드르 고동 고네 시다 인 제바나 유드 두니 마저바디 제바라 제데메바데 신도 쉐데나 자타지벨로 동세나 나주르 제바 샤니 쉐데 나와랑 예네로 샤다비 냠데 유든 디베제 바바나 제 마저바인 림발라 데다드 민제바 타니베시 안게 샤바베 데다라 라오나 그거니 시베 니루디 여바르베데 시자빈 제바데 토바예바 코네 여바니 토바메바 여바니 메바데다니 코르마자바 탁바도발라바 탁비 두다랑 고도 마저바니 러시 랑고 마저베스데다 수조 테나나 나글레 안게 샤바메바 랑고 고니 예든 두바토바텔로 다감 랑시게서 라티니에 체버지 시 가사게 된데 메바네 가사게 담에도 meg나와서 베시 된데 메바 체이 담에도 소베라시데 가사동 체제 된데 여바란 제바네 다인지베 지데 다인지베 제바쇼기 도바 민소 시제베 제발이야 데라바 다지 자와네 가용어 나와르 셰라라마르 마레베 오르 예데 데메나 다메오 데르셔다 가자 여원이서도 제게 다베서 가자 다메오 시셔오 시야 소바 따로 제대 가자랑 것이 저바제버디 가자게 다디베 제베 메레데 시데나 가자 신나 메그니 저기서 저바자바 가자가 당시에 졸라 틴도나니 지도다 또 다시 조가 telani 나오냐바가 미지비랑 미지비 지다르 메레베시르시나 가자라나 시에반제바니 뱅가르 시바다 가자나 시에바 가자게 다디버숭 가자게 다지데 되고서 오장 가자게 다지데 발라바 지데 마차바이 노는 지데 당진 러시다시고냐 지타군다제 당진로 몽보그 베데바가시 제게 풍불미니 다지베제 바바다랭에바 메나야 지달린제니 조바 풍부미가 임바가시 제바니 따비에 다미 바라숭 비바 풍부미바 세계 강사 정시 메인제 mi bara me ba me je ba khang sa za je me ba wo de yang ngo nyang be ze ba je be xie ju be khang sa go yu xie je khang sa ni me ba mai nu 다 그래서 휴존의 뒤에서 기자 그래서 코에 자와 되는 그래서 최이 당시 말해봐도 그래서 나는 코알 좋아할 최이 당에도 그래서 뒤다 자외 캐년도 뒤여로 자외 캐년 뒤에서 다들 이제 롱지발로 써봐 거기 니랑 최이 당에 마도 그게 등게 놓으셔로 어디 있다 쇠바들 리고서 어디 쇠바들 다 티버시 뭐 있는데 그 결혼한다는 시야는 임베시에 시키는 뭐 니랑도 마루 방거로 왔어. 그래서 가져 연구를 했어. 다디 좋아도 그랬어. 들면 뭐지 티버시 뭐 흉노 어깨 돈 담발을 줘봐. 다 시시나 다 저기 인도 흉노기 돈 담발을 줘봐. 등지 들시에 봐. 머리 비디베 양시 머리 디베 양시 시조 송신 시조 송신 없이 니든베 참조되어 내려봐 다시 인도에 티버서 tumwe 도데 탈 때네 다이 넘버 미시버 정지 대시번 디베 뒤는 송시의 시소 송베나 로bun산지 짱짱 인라준이 동부 머리바 머리바 동부 머리바 응고발을 시도도 봐 시에봤다 니랑랑 최에다 메도에 봐 시에바 셀로스 다디 제다다 다도 최이 당시다 가사다 머리바디 코에 자와 있을 라인자 제다다 자주부터 코에 자와 머리바 방고인자 티스거다 이니 최이 당시 머리바레스 시스다디 최이 당시 통면 머리바 가사 나중에 담볼 머리바 민도 근데 랑주 민제되와 어디시든 다들 세시시네 랑주 민제되 디데리데 다들天주로라 이는 고볼로 고바다 다다디 리버트디마 손티 걸 사지장당 주관과 주신의 건지 시바직바레시 어다 최 가사 최이단데 가사다 인가인데 말이바리 이랑게 돈이 도고 그랬어 다 이랑 돈이 도 요말 시트감데 켈링 말이 샤지
Geshe read from page 210 to 214 of the volume number 3 in the English translation of great treatise called Lamrim Chenmo. And now we are back to page 210 where we left off last week, and Geshe started his explication here. So those of you who have got the textbook, we are on page 210. Somewhere in the middle. So one of the things that we talked about the other day is this. According to Prasangika Madhyamika, the highest Buddhist middle way school of thought, both grasping at the self of a person and grasping at the self of phenomena constitute the root cause of samsara. Okay? So now questions are raised about that particular issue because in the Sevatandika Madhyamika, the other sub-school of middle way, and schools below, especially the schools where really they don't accept grasping at the self of phenomena, they only accept grasping at the self of a person. Okay? And so the question's asked, so does that mean then the Sharvakas, they, do not understand, or they cannot understand emptiness, because in those schools of thought, what is identified as the ignorance, the basic cause of samsara, is grasping at self of a person. They don't accept the self of a phenomena. Yeah? And so the question asked that, yes, it seems like you have explained, what is and how to kind of approach the ultimate from the Mahayana perspective point of view. Now, could you explain the how to approach the ultimate from the what we call the other Buddhist perspective. Let's call it Theravada perspective or Sravaka perspective. Okay, so as Geshe explained that all Buddhist schools of thought accept, this is universal contention of all Buddhists, that in order to be free from samsara, cyclic existence, or to become an arahat or arahant, literally called four destroyer. It's not elegant in English, but what do you do? The four or the anime here meaning afflictive emotions, one must realize emptiness, right? Shunyata. Without realizing emptiness, there is no way to nirvana. That's accepted by all Buddhist schools of thought. There is no argument about that. Okay, and so all Buddhist schools of thought accept that in the 12 links of interdependent originations or dependent links, we call Tende Yenla Chung in Tibetan. The first link is that of ignorance or avidya, marikpa. So marikpa or avidya is the basic cause of samsara. Everybody accepts that. Okay, and so in that context, so how do you explain this? That it is as if from the Shravaka's perspective, you are saying there are two causes of samsara, right? Because we all agree there's only one cause, a root cause of samsara, that's ignorance. Now you're talking about grasping at the self of a person, grasping at the self of a phenomena. That's two, that's not one, right? So they're kind of challenging the Mahayana. So explain yourself, and kind of thing. No scan.
최기 당시 연락중에 마리바를 교환돼 임바 셰바 시시 시작부터 또베 통 청와지 되는 대로 가버샤 해서 똑방 또바 간단하게 시바 마인지 최나랑 오저버 존도베 똑바니 똑바인데 딘제발에 똑바네 양다바 마인베 라히예서 동로도바 때 해송시 대형 유무지 말바 셰베 들 냥도 남도 탐지 유리병 고번 되와니 시무 러이마 다바오스 다디 돈다 되게 간제 그래서 연락중이 말을 통해 말을 했다 주다 모아서 이나는 코에서와 인라고 왔다 다디 다 런지메 디 말을 강사 당도 말치 당도 요 말을 실라디 오셔서 디지드던다 지지도전다 강사 당지대는 연락중이 나그 말이 왜 입었나시 이 수익이 당지대 간 에디 가서 연락중이 마스 말이 말이스 가르스는 코니 최진의 거니 샤를 마도 제 네고 비게 각사 살아가는 샤요 말와스 세다 티 줍제 타두도 가서 연락 수익 되면 또 오고야 그래서 이 연락 다즈부터 말이 방으로 왔지 강사 당지 방으로 왔어 강사 당지 방은 수익 당지 방으로 코니를 연 차라잖아 요 말와 시비유장 샤를 뭐 이제 애네 가자를 차라요 말이스 어때 매우다 더버시한테 왔지 기저 롱트도 더버시 더버 탐지 시가 말이 애네 연락이 말이 샤샤스 뭐셔도 다 티시네 줍지도 그래서 다베나 데르바 그래서 다 수익 다즈베 엔 당지 소유주의 더블 가서 일하지 말아봐인데 에 가사 당지 현도셔야 주시다. 그리고 가사 당지 직번 제노 직번에 걸어. 최선을 가가지고 제다 직번에 와. 어디 좀다 건식 가서 다 줍다 오마게 돼. 최기 당지 일하지 말아봐 캐데 그 말아봐. 디시나 리베 푸니 시고로 와. 어디서 다 이제 어디 우주신 이런 식이 다음에 또그 유대주의 어디 제가 연락중이 머리바디 인수이 등에서 가다 인가 인수 어디 좀니 되게는 이 가르사 되도서 연락 단수이 되고 티롭도 그래서 연락중이 저 가르사 나도 머리바 마바나 타와토예요 말와 어디
So we're towards the end of page 210 and over page 211. And as Geshe explained, that all Buddhist schools of thought accept that ignorance or avidya, marikpa, the first link of 12 links of interdependent originations is the root cause of samsara or cyclic existence. Okay? So according to the Prasangika Madhyamikans, represented by Aryadeva and Chandakirti, that ignorance is inclusive. It includes both grasping at self of a person and grasping at the self of a phenomena. Okay? That ignorance includes both types of grasping. And still, the contention that ignorance is the cause of cyclic existence stands, true here. And so the Prasangika Madhyamikans contend that Shravakas who have attained nirvana or liberation, so they have, realized emptiness, the ultimate nature of everything that exists, and uprooted that basic ignorance, which includes grasping at self of a person and grasping at self of a phenomenon. Okay? Yes, in the Savatandika Madhyamika school, the middle way sub-school and schools below, they don't talk about grasping at self of phenomena per se, because they only talk about grasping at the self of a person, but that does not matter here. The reason is, as the Prasangika Madhyamikans explain, that there are no two types of ignorance, and we are not saying that there are two root causes of samsara. Ignorance is just one. It's simply that from the point of the basis, we can talk about phenomena and self. Those are two bases. But in terms of what the intrinsic reality is, grasping at it is basically the same thing. The way we grasp at the self of a person and the way we grasp at the self of phenomena is exactly the same thing. There is no even subtle difference. It is not like one of the grasping is a little subtler and the other is kind of a little coarse. There's some kind of difference. There isn't one. They're exactly the same thing. The way they perceive, their referent object, self of a person, self phenomena, is exactly the same thing. So from their point of view, the Prasangika Madhyamikans make an argument that the Shravakas, who have attained arhatship or the nirvana, they have uprooted that basic ignorance, which includes both grasping at the self of a person and grasping at self of phenomena. So without uprooting, both types of grasping, there is no way to find liberation or to be free from samsara. Just because they are free, they are called arhats, right? So they have uprooted that ignorance. So this is basically, we have a citation from Aryadeva's 400 stanzas, Chetuk Shedak, Shibkyapa, at the bottom of page 210, which states, I quote, "Conceptuality sees and you are bound. It should be stopped here," unquote. So conceptuality binds us in samsara. But this conceptuality does not mean any kind of conceptual thought processes. It specifically refers to the conception of superimposing intrinsic reality onto things and seeing the things to exist in that way. So that particular conceptuality we are talking about, which is the root cause of samsara, and that conceptuality is a fetter. It binds us in samsara. So we need to get rid of that in order to attain nirvana or liberation from samsara. For that we need to realize emptiness. So if you have uprooted that conceptuality, that includes both grasping at the self of a person and grasping at the self of the phenomena. So this is how the Prasangika Madhyamikans make their case that Shravakas who have attained nirvana have also abandoned both types of grasping.
다 디를 디미자 시자바 또 통화 심화돼서 똑바지 가르치는 그냥 뉴모마지 말을 시에서 똑바지 뉴모마지 말을 당시대 세계를 말이지 디디에서 가를 본바서 강바에서 아주 뭐디 저냠도 똑바 탐지 강가에는 가자 말이스 그러봐 힘을 이 마다 봐스티 그다음에는 시계지 똑바 강가에는 로히들의 로도이나 수지 때 그런 이게 그게 당부도 되선 또배도 없이 뭐 무슨 그 음식은 또요 말봐. 또 하면은 돈이 또 받아. 남을 자 또봐 가야 니시자니야 매차 그랬지. 니시자니만이 돈이 니시만이 나 당부고 또배도 엔데 양무슨 뭔지라 말이나. 애니 오메 shum스나다 상지기다 거기 거기서 타바터지 탑 때뭐 간가 엔 톨라레스 또보 간가 애니 그래서 로히나 애니 수도기고 또보 미히니 애니 유다벌로 샤도 뭐리 야가 스타벨는 데 스타티가가 로히나 애니 야팔은 삼잔게 수도기고 로르 자는 매우 샤도로 와시 디시데 인 수sun 고스 그 시부 간가 애니 톨라도 그래서 그러와
So we're on page 211. I'm at the bottom of page 210, where we just cited Aryadeva's 400 stanzas, Chatuk Shetak, which states conceptuality binds us. So this particular conceptuality or conception does not refer to any kind of conceptual thought processes that we experience. For example, when we look at a pillar, we have this conceptual perception of a pillar because we recognize that is a pillar. We know, well, that is a vase. That's a flower vase. But those conceptions, are not something that's refuted. What we're talking about is this particular conception of attributing or superimposing intrinsic reality onto a phenomena and self, and then see all the things as existing in that particular mode. So that particular conceptuality is the real troublemaker. He didn't say that, but it is, the real troublemaker. So we need to get rid of that in order to attain liberation from samsara. And so all kinds of conceptual thought processes that exist within us as ordinary sentient beings, in a sense, being ordinary means we will have conceptual thought processes. We will see the pillar as pillar and vase as vase, whatever it is. And that's part of our experiences, and they do not necessarily have to be wrong perceptions or distorted perceptions, lokshe, right? All the conceptual thought processes are not necessarily lokshe, distorted perceptions, because they are valid. And as a matter of fact, we must not really, seize all kinds of conceptual thought processes, because initially, when we, the ordinary people, understand or realize emptiness or the ultimate nature, we realize it conceptually. That's the way it is, isn't it? Because that's the only way we can approach the ultimate reality. We see it through the lens of conceptuality. So that's valid, conceptuality. And, if we say, well, that conceptuality needs to be stopped altogether, then we have no way to connect ourselves with the path to liberation, right? How can we really connect ourselves to the path to liberation? Because that includes that kind of conceptuality. When we talk about cultivating spiritual paths, that involves, right, understanding emptiness conceptually. So we must recognize that if all kinds of conception need to be abandoned or ceased, then there is no way for us to attain liberation. And then a lot of the things Buddha Shakyamuni taught with all kinds of efforts is just kind of useless. All Buddha's teachings, talk about cultivating paths, things will become meaningless and useless. So that's not the case. So we must understand that when Arya Deva says conceptuality binds us, he is talking about that particular conceptuality of superimposing intrinsic reality onto things and seeing things as, in that particular mode. Okay, that needs to be challenged and that needs to be uprooted.
Tome do lode nyange menda di shiba nang so data sia yel ma ji loda de loda di bige gomni hide na ane di tarba taji shiba kaya to marwa o di to maris di sanji loda den to maris so oris sezo di loda mari ko lo yang da baris o di mda jidan da de shin da do si hin de shin de ro 먼저 그 로브셔스 다트야 레강가 단단 가서 다트사 강가 똑바시다 메시 무슨 대지야요 막 무슨 그러다 맥 나와 가래는 그나 카드 통은 자퇴바 다가 당하지 뭐 이제 콜라 로브셔스니 야 사브 동야다 드려요 봐라
올라래.
다트사 강가 똑바지 봐라
올라래.
진짜 똑바면 다 가서 피데 다 최직대 가래는 로브셔스 다트가 로브셔스게 강가 매차로 봐라 꼴자 로히는 페도야 봐라
No, so. So on top page 11 it says we are talking about a particular kind of conception or conceptuality that superimposes intrinsic reality onto things and sees all the things in that mode, and that conceptuality must be tackled and must be seized and uprooted. Not all kinds of conceptual perceptions or thought processes. And so that conceptuality is considered as an afflictive emotion, nyunmongchen, right, Geshe, as we talked about this before. Otherwise, as Geshe said, think this way. When we talk about, giving teachings, listening to teachings, and being educated about this thing, that involves a lot of thinking, isn't it? Conceptualization. The whole idea is, so all the teachings we are going here, participating in this, like try to communicate an idea or message to you. You are trying to decode the meaning. So that all involves conceptualization, isn't it? So if that needs to be stopped, then there's not going to be any process, right? Because we cannot do anything much with our non-conceptual direct perceptions, The visual perception sees what it is. The auditory perception hears what it is. It's not going to think like, well, I'm hearing it, That's not what the auditory perception does. It does not think like, well, I like that, whatever sound. Or the visual conscious doesn't, I like that object. No, it doesn't. It just sees it. So when we involve in the teaching, there's no way to give you that kind of non-conceptual experiences. We are all involved in encoding, decoding the message communication. That all involves conceptual processes, So these processes are valid, And if all conceptual process need to be stopped, well, good luck, he didn't say, but, and then nothing will happen,
nga chibe maribati da maribata da chei da se da khawsa da di khaje khawda ya rahi chuban ze bade wa de nga chibe maribba zindan ji shin ti ni sher sha ni rang da shin je deva ngobo ma nan ji se chebar thuma shi do da ba khubde ange sha ba tam je ni maribba zindan ji yu ti ni sun shong na zawa chibe jomba da ane 타다 노번 주비 셰럽진인데 ninji 머리비 신 가제서 시바 차이 군다 줍대 주다모 바이게다 왔음 가발라 훌훌로 메샤데 데다 가자 고바니 차와풍니 시바 민지 가자디 유진지 로도디 심진 코와치와 토니 디 유신자바 인다 심제 탄지디 코와치와니 linji marikba yinbi sherdan, kundaji marikba ni judama khana yu khoyato ma mitibi sheros. Dire da karsa ngashi marikba seyata kanje rangshi chuban zibasana da tenyu demba chubasana da tsudu chubasana jigbara odi zidu seyati shinyu dingi sherishani. Opa gaza gaya za ti shishani, ti indu muzi, ti gaya ya tsu shigo, resi raba. 다들 안에 샤니 다 샤니 현기 되어 걸사 얘네 랑다 현기 되어 다 랑다 해다 그래는 거기 대교 매제 간갈에 라고 저 저기 저 차로 디게저와 뭐나 이 체벌 드마시 좋다 봐 접대 온게 샤바 탐지데스다 맞아도다 머리바 당시디 시샤 인티간 소소소기다 로 삼주시네는 맨 카제 다다바에서 카제라가 메세야 조신 티갈이야 계좌 먹고 용거로 와. 나래. 계좌 먹고 용거디 레다딘데 당다 가자 락바트서 다 딱바다 드솔 페이지에 와지 메워 드롭드는 에네 티그 당진 가이노요 말와. 노소. 제가 디제 강에 자드도 가르세는 에네 단다 장히 좋아지 당진디데스. 노소. 제가 티인자 다 간도 제주신 탈바등게도 가르치고도 어디 제주시고 뭐 이제 룹데 군다와 강가 가르치는 지금도 제주시다는 에는 코제 쉬는 펜토야시라요 말이라 코제 조조세요 말아 로달 제조도요 말아 现在第一个个出去的啥玩意儿的，可是当不的呢？但是刚才学到这么的，当时是那这人些这么的了凶人是，现在的也太不对呢，毕竟也把这么的多不对呢。用这个7万多的那，你这些我挺多呀，当然人别无的，挺多上呢。你现在滚大学，我刚刚你应该那些说是新的早啊，就是那应该给我帮助是吧？现在老多刚刚搞着我这是不是？
Awesome. We're still on page 211. Something I left from the previous explanation is so in light of what we just talked about, the contention that someone makes that all thought processes must be ceased, right? Kind of like, we should stop all kinds of thinking and be in the state of, thinking about nothingness. So that is, just kind of placing ourselves in a wrong situation, wrong consciousness, right? So being in a wrong or distorted consciousness, we are not going to achieve freedom or liberation. Yeah? And so we must know what kind of conceptuality that must be seized in order to be free. And we already talked about that. It is a particular kind of conceptuality which superimposes intrinsic reality onto things, not any kind of thought processes. And so our challenge here is to be able to recognize or identify what is called the referent object of our grasping, at self, at the self of person and phenomena. The Tibetan term is Shenyu, right? And so figure out, how do we perceive the selves to exist? So we perceive them to exist according to Prasangikas, right? These are the synonyms, right? We perceive them to exist intrinsically, perceive them to exist truly, perceive them to exist objectively, right? So inherent existence, intrinsic existence, true existence, all of these things mean the same thing in the Prasangika Madhyamika school, but in other schools of thought, they might accept, they do accept intrinsic reality, right? So we have to be careful with the use of terminology and distinctions among those things. So all of us have that basic ignorance of superimposing intrinsic reality onto things and seeing all things as if they exist in that mode or in that fashion. Okay? And with that as our basic ignorance, then we might add more ignorance to that, or more sort of a conceptuality, right? Now somebody thinks that, well, that self is also permanent, Well, that self is also solitary, kind of a loser. No, he didn't say that, but, the autonomous, whatever it is, right? So we add many other layers to that. All these extra layers we add are basically what we call imaginary constructs. These are kind of intellectual, contributions we are making. These are not innately developed conceptions. These are just like our contributions, to the potluck here, So if you really have to deal with all kinds of intellectual, this kind of contributions, additions we have made, it becomes endless, That becomes like too much, Where do we begin and where do we end? It's just like endless thing. So instead of worrying about all these peripheral things, as we say, the branches of the trees and the flowers and the fruits, look at the root. You don't like this tree? Get it out of the root, then that's it, right? So this is how we have to really go deep down and figure out this ignorance that superimposes intrinsic reality onto things and then sees the things in that mode. If we can figure that one out, if we can uproot that, then all other things will, just naturally get uprooted. It's just like you pull the tree or the plant from its root, there's not going to be branches, that's not going to be leaves, that's not going to be fruits, That's how it is, And so that's the important thing we must keep in our mind, because what binds us to samsara is not so much the intellectually developed graspings or the philosophical viewpoints that we subscribe to. What binds us to samsara is that innately developed, just naturally developed this conception of superimposing intrinsic reality onto things.
because karsa chevan de shene because in the because don't you about this and be toba gange hinyu re ka ni tireshi de na pendo yo mar siwa siwa da kanji and juzama de gudama de hullang yo mares karsa ko 다 소소 밴드 컴베 용도 행동도全部시 연가 뭐뭐시 되게 강발 내봐도 뭐 연구였나 아니 거 연가 되게 때때 되게는 파조된 수준 게 우도신 그 강연도 상도야 지야 용말와 제가 그 자와니 지향은 안고 연가 강가 감도 그러와 뭐 되나시 어시네 진짜 돈다全部시 위원이 애네디 다나 단 고볼로 라서 되게 강제 낭배 애네 좀 기부터 봐서 그 오멜람 다 가지 릴론이베 시부시 때 판데 애니 꿀리 셔보 자와샤와데 애니 코나스 데레스 운자 갈장 거버니 저에 봉보 시바면 기세로와 제가 고들래 리베다 야 망보 시에야 되거든 레가 많이 비신다 거기서 레기면 괜찮지 좀 말해 어디서 시험을 시고로 시험을 가르세는 애니 간서 심지어다데 애니 대화데 등에미들지 다디 티 등에 탐지 시타야지다 대화타지 용서야 돈다 진짜지 땡을 받고 버려시 왜와 제다디 강제 유진이 로도 심지 코아치만 통니 티유스 저버에 모두 제를 다가스 에디피게스가 저와 뭐여서 다가 니마 피비로 말해세 제다다 인디 로도도 버레 간디지다 펜도요 펜도면 시죠 말수 거라 심지어다지 코아치만 린기 말해 비니 비서 제다 코아치는 것도 당다 다 통음에 누군 바이가 자든 그 쓰르는 디자와데 어딘지들에 뭐지 카드 로다 바디셔데 마레스 그래서 나 애니 군다 유다마 코나리요 디 군다세 유다마 센테 다가 냥한테 다 릴름데 남자 신게들 가르서 유다마데 시고 마레 시고 다 장간서 유다마 인스나 피지 리고 좋아 맞데 애니 다 심지 무슨 라서 가지 거기 이걸 코에서도 여러 가지도 팀도야 돈달 쉬거나 그다음에 코나 예 가서 대다 코나 예 코에서 미대비 쉬어 세다 코에서 시디잖아 코아 공기 심지 수인 디글 코에서 하면 거 코아 거 말봐 세다 군다 되는 가서 미대인데 뭐 이제 그다음에 매 강갈 요마다 그다음에 지 대리름 창에 들어 줄이어도 뭐 요마봐 그래서 티페도 말이지 사회린지 어디 무슨 그랬어요. 어디 팀이다. 다 계시주 그바들다.
So we are at the bottom of page 211, and so as Geshe explained that so we are in a sense not interested to figure out the referent objects of all kinds of imaginary conceptions that we have, that's not what it is, because that becomes a very endless job for us. We are here to figure out the referent object of our basic ignorance that superimposes intrinsic reality onto things, because that's the very root of all other, conceptual thought processes, and as again, Geshe emphasized this example. Let's say if there is kind of awkward tree in your backyard and you don't like it, it's occupying too much space, well, then the wise thing to do is to pull out this tree from the very root, right? But instead of doing that, you get so annoyed by its presence there, and you keep on trimming the branches and the leaves, everything. Well, they will come back all the time, so that's going to keep on annoying you. It's just an endless job you're doing. You just want to get it out from the very root. So in the same way, instead of having to figure out the referent objects of every imaginary construct or the conception we have, which is endless work, task, we should just stick to one and figure out the referent object of our basic ignorance, and get rid of it. It'll get rid of everything else. All those what are called imaginary constructs or intellectually developed constructs. So the Tibetan term here is Phuntsok. Imputed, usually we say, but in this case, it is intellectually formed construct. So what it means is this really exists, maybe we could say in us too, those who are exposed to different philosophical standpoints, right? When we deal with different philosophical standpoints about this and that, then we have all these different positions and ideas and contradictions, all kind of things, but these are not the root causes of constitute our root cause of samsara. These are kind of peripheral things, if you will. But deep down is that basic ignorance we have to get at. And the reason why we should be really interested in that, all of us, is because all of us wish for happiness, right? All sentient beings, as a matter of fact. None of us wants any kind of suffering problem. Okay? So if you want to end suffering, we want lasting happiness, then the only thing we could do and we must do is uproot that basic ignorance from within our mind that superimposes intrinsic reality onto things. And so this is why great Shakyamuni Buddha, starting with Buddha, and then other great masters, Arya Nagarjuna and Arya Deva and Chandrakirti, all of the above and more. Okay? So they have made a lot of efforts to elucidate, right, the ultimate nature of reality and to help us recognize that basic ignorance. They have employed, all kinds of reasonings, critical thinking, tools, analysis to help us to be able to do that, right? So they did not write all those works because they have nothing better to do and they have too much time at hand and they don't know what to do and just kind of bored to death. And then they created a job for themselves. That's not what it is, And they did not write those treatises because they like to make an argument. They are like arguing kind of people. No, that's not for the same argumentation. Their basic motivation is, to help sentient beings, to find the happiness they're seeking and end the suffering they don't want. And to be able to do that, we really have to understand that basic conceptuality or ignorance, right? That superimposes intrinsic reality onto things, and then find a way to, uproot that.
다단도 오만주변은 뒤지어와 그래서 뒤찍발에 그래서 간다 든도게 맞게죠 대자 맞게다 말은 난지 들어라는 저통을 라로와 셔도 심지어 가다 든돌게 든시냐 든돌게 들게 보면 뭐 든돌게 딩게들이 여리스 그래서 애니 치료돼야 딱배다도 지금 하고 말이스 이나 코너지 난지도 코너지를 여리스 어쨌다 뒤여서 두건저 난지들 생기게 막게 딱 리군다디 펜토고 말이야. 이거 데려와. 또 간장 심지 들어 간갈에 간장 간지 입에 유전도 가래서는 무트가 툭툭 당 가르치는 맛이나 간지 신나셔야지 줘야 저 단중야도 상고사상도 와. 이거 어디 하고 왔다. 가 이거지.
So as Geshe quoted, from his memory, I believe, supplement to the middle way or Madhyamika Avatar, where it is stated that when the example given is, those of the animals, lesser kind of animals we're talking about, who are reborn as animal over and again, right, life after life. And these animals, really, they have no idea or clue about self as being permanent, autonomous, anything, because they have never had a chance to learn about those things exposed, because they have been animal over and again, right? But still, they are in samsara, and they're trapped like us. Why? Because they have that basic ignorance of superimposing intrinsic reality, right, onto things and seeing the things in that way. So when we talk about the root cause of samsara, all of us, so that root cause has to be pervasive and applicable to all beings who are trapped in samsara. It doesn't matter what kind of form and what kind of life you have, right? Everybody who's trapped in samsara, have that same basic ignorance, So that basic ignorance cannot be imaginary construct. It cannot be intellectually developed some kind of a conception, because then many of the beings are not exposed to philosophical debate and anything like that. Okay? And so that's something important for us to keep in the mind. And so Geshe says, how do we know that even animals have the same grasping at the intrinsic self? Is I think in many ways we all have the shared same experiences. When we are in a dangerous situation, we can realize how much we cherish that intrinsic self. So this is why we have the fight and flight syndrome, right? Either we're going to fight or we're going to fight, run away, right? Why is that? Because of the fear to lose, right? That intrinsic self we cherish too much,
언제 다 그래서 님명지 제바 아니 그래서 님명 제바 니바 힌두 해셔 어디 고야 그래서 니지 당시디 가가 다 그 타르바 톰두이나 이니 디자디 니지디 린지디 간데레도 똑바 탐지 마리스 인디제지르다 당시 니지세 니제리 다 당시 해야지 어디 똑바 나리 예와시는 당시 까야지다 샤야지 어디 임맥셔야지 계셔 버리세요 그러나 다 또바 건강가 그래야지 때 부여 로도 뭐뭐여라 비지 등산라 비지 예사리 가지 예사리 와 제가디 그 디워선디 로강가 배 가서 해야나 인디 말와 제가들이야 인 똑발이야 폐 도비야 똑바지다 폐 무도 똑바디 맥셔야지 해다 계셔 버리세요 와 그다 가자지불로도 타르투바니 연라 중에 당부 당부 린지게 말해봐이나 세다 가지 연라 중에 당부 말해봐대가 레스 너 레스 다 군다제 가자 남자 나마 실시네 론도 거나 임베스나 세다 군다데 당부 용거야 그 당지 군다세 다 딱버서 당부 너거야 가르서 계기 당지디 열 때는 ene dara yitwa zin to chile eno do hindwadi in lingi dan zile ngores imbe angela sobe ta tongme dzole biti tongme ge dema zingo marwa chile tongme hiwad zinata ji de sunjama shigo mares urwa zinata ji ne tamje ne namya ribye sunjama meno se odi ka mares ti ji ribye se 진짜 수용하셔 로니 이시 또 거나당 돼요 다지바 니섬 대다게다베 유일 켜버로도비 또바는 인지 또바 거인단제를 메셔워서 제가 다티 자와저버들 에는 다드베 또바 니섬세도 최이 당시의 강사당 인시 어디가 버와 다 디저 제셔베 연화도 가르선다 대자시다 때 무관제 상용인용 강가 콘설 이용샤와 인자 어디에 강가 방과야 뭐 이게 또 강가 방고 말이스 어디입니다.
So we're on top of page 212. So the crux of the matter here is that Nejitun in Tibetan, important, is that, we must and we don't need to cease or put an end to all kinds of conceptual thought processes. We shouldn't be doing that, as a matter of fact. We should be able to make a distinction among the conceptual thoughts. What are the conceptual thoughts that we really don't need to mess up with? Let it be, and what is the kind of conceptual thought that we must tackle and get rid of, right? So all conceptual thoughts are not on the same level. They're not all distorted and wrong consciousness. So we have, as we have talked a lot about this, that we have to identify that the conceptuality in us that superimposes intrinsic reality on a thing is the conceptuality that must be recognized, that must be seized. Okay? But not all kinds of conceptual thought processes, because many of them are valid, and as a matter of fact, we need them. We talked about those things, okay, for our spiritual progress. So as Geshe explained, that if we can identify that basic ignorance of the conceptuality, that is the root problem, then all other intellectually formed distorted perceptions, let's say, or the imaginary constructs, distorted ones, we will be able to get rid of them, quite easily, so our job, so to speak, is not to kind of figure out every kind of imaginary distorted conception constructs and their referent object, because that's an endless job. Our job is to be able to identify, the basic conceptuality or ignorance. So what's important here is, the thing we're talking about, some of you really know this, right? Even in ancient Tibet, there was some philosophical standpoint being made that all kinds of conceptual thought processes must be blocked and stopped and be in the state of nothingness, and that means liberation and hallelujah, right? Well, there's a problem there. And even today, Geshe thinks maybe the same kind of line of thinking could still exist, right, in today's world, where some people say, you know what, hey, the real problem is thinking too much. Stop all the thought processes altogether, right? That is issue. We're taking issue with that, right? Because we should not and we cannot stop all thought processes at this point. We are ordinary sentient beings. So we need to make a distinction among the thought processes, which is the varied and valid one, and which is the one that we really need to tackle and get rid of. That's the crux of the matter. So as Geshe explained, this is on page 12 on the top, that the kind of conceptuality or conception that we should get rid of is that basic ignorance that superimposes intrinsic reality onto phenomena and person, isn't it? So that's why we have two types of graspings. Grasping at the self of a person, in Tibetan, grasping at the self of phenomena, these two grasping are the conceptual processes or graspings that we must get rid of, including understanding the absence of their referent objects. So what we're really talking about is the conceptuality, not the non-conceptual perceptions that we experience, right? We have non-conceptual sensory perceptions. And these non-conceptual sensory perceptions do not grasp at anything. Our visual, our non-conceptual consciousness does not grasp at visual objects, okay? So non-conceptual perceptions do not grasp at anything as being intrinsic. It's the concept, that particular conceptuality that makes us to do that. So if we can get rid of that, we can get rid of many other distorted imaginary constructs. As a matter of fact, if we can uproot that ignorance, we can uproot all other root delusions, afflictive emotions, secondary afflictive emotions, and all other things. So we have just one job to do, so to speak. So identify that basic ignorance.
파바야도 쇼나 랑히데 해야요와 이나 다 다다디가 랑히 주바지마스난다 데바 주바지마스난다 라그생이 주바지마스 어딘지나디 카르스는 데레스 쳬다 강사 가루라스 이 로이샤바 멤버 쳬데나 랑랑 둘루고 주바지마텔라 이네 랑히 주바지마스게레스 노티레도와
So in the middle of page 212, so it brings us back to the basic fundamental question. What does ignorance superimposes, how does ignorance superimposes intrinsic nature? The Tibetan term is called rangshin, which is simply translated as nature usually, right? But nature could be understood in many different ways. In some sense, as Aryadeva talks about in his works about, the nature of conventional phenomena. For example, what's the nature of fire? Heat, burn, everything, right? That's the nature. Yeah, what's the nature of the water? It's a fluidity, it'll make things wet. Yeah? So we are not talking about that kind of a rangshin or a nature. Yeah? We are talking about a particular kind of a nature that things don't have. And here in English we call it intrinsic, right, nature, just to identify that. So what is it? What it is that, we have this basic ignorance in us that superimposes this intrinsic reality onto everything we see and experience. And what it actually does is that it makes us to see the things as if things exist in and of themselves without being, without being like a designated from the subjective point of view, but without posited from the conceptual or subjective point of view. We see everything as if existing objectively from there to us, right, over there to us intrinsically, without being, designated or from the subjective point of view. So that's what we mean intrinsic reality.
teach that in Shin and Iran, Dulu tell the Dakam, Ranshin, she Taba Tazungi, Gonimoson Shadis, or dear Daka, Chui Dang the Kaza Chui Da, the Kaza Da, the Yoda Yomarva. The Kora Unique country used what it is that Lut on Shaba Maiva, and Kono Tuma Dulu Guntua Shuna, and it tell Da Sigores, or the Ins, that Taba Tazung is Sidutana, go Mesigorva, for trade of the disease. This one said that the Carson, the good wrong may but then a done you my she be Hijab in Devales, that is Hijabal Teleson, that is Paden the way Deval Doimrava. Then a run can't run more than Ranshin, the round, the Hella Ramaleva, Yim Batelani, she then no don't do some bataros. What the wrong thing to Basenda, Ranshi to Basenda. Any Dulus to Basenata, Demba to Basenata, Tiega, any Hijabe, non 60 doa, because the good army by the tenor down you might say, Deva, any patent the way Devena Carson, or Diega make it down, he say, Lashas.
No, so. So we're in the middle of page 212. So as Geshe explained, so that when we talk about the self of a person, which is understood, footnote, intrinsic self of a person, self of a phenomena, intrinsic self of a phenomena, in reality, these selves don't exist. Hypothetically speaking, right? Hypothetically speaking, this is how we perceive phenomena as self to exist, as if they exist in and of themselves without being posited from or designated by subjective, perception. Yeah, so that's what we call intrinsic nature, if you will. So as stated here, so we have a citation from Arya Nagarjuna's 400 stanzas. I quote, "All of this is without its own power, therefore there is no self," unquote. And then Chandrakirti comments on that particular thing, and I quote, "It is that which exists essentially, intrinsically, autonomously, and without depending on other." So that's the definition of intrinsic nature. Okay? If something were to exist intrinsically, hypothetically speaking, how would it exist and how should it exist? It should exist just the way it is stated here. It should exist autonomously, intrinsically, essentially, without having to do with anything else, without depending upon anything else, right? Do such things exist in reality? No. But hypothetically speaking, yes, because that's how we are messed up. He didn't say that again. Excuse me. I have to use the mess up a lot to get the message strongly. So we are screwed up here. So from Prasangika Madhya point of view, they use all kind of terminologies, to help us understand that. So that's why they talk about, Rangshinji Drupa, intrinsic reality of nature, right? Temper Drupa, truly existent nature, right? Rangana Drupa, objectively existent nature. Rangatsinji Drupa, characteristically existent, or whatever, All are synonymous terms, basically saying like, hello, this is how, things don't exist in that way, but that's how you superimpose thing into them, and then you're goofed. You means all of us, yeah.
What's that? Till it occurs that. Tell him Ramali said, you're the number of share or Dembato or Henla Ramali. What I Henla Ramali said, Carasena, Chidancing on the time you don't really Henla Ramali City, Ranjata Peva. Do you sort of who didn't you see my Desidava? Eugene Rale Lagomar Carasena, Eugene Tanya Ramala, Eugene Matthew Brigade. You cannot move to tell you, Henla Ramali, see what is?
No.
That seems of a musician, Henla Ramali. Eugene Ramale Sigua. That thing you Henla Ramale City, Ron Joji Lotil Ramale. Topeta was a Messiah. Was that Topatil? They'll call you was on the Topatil, then you was on by Conan, 2 months ago, you young Nizu Marcia. Henla Ramaleba was the tender Rama he chatted. You did a wrong, news of Dulu. 2 months was that did it. Two months taken, Ramansinanda, Utah Ran, Niluxananda, Duluxananda, or Tinjin Sigores.
No, so we are towards the end of or at the bottom of page 212. So as Geshe explained, again referring to Chandrakirti's commentary on Aryadeva's the statement, and the Chandrakirti's commentary states, it is that which exists essentially, intrinsically, autonomously, without depending on another. So without depending on another, what does it mean? Okay. In many ways, without depending on other, people might interpret it in terms of what we call products or produced phenomena, right? For produced phenomena, they have to depend on causes and conditions to exist. So that means they are dependent on something, right? But in this particular context, it does not mean that. It means without depending on another means depending on the designation of a subjective, thought. Okay, so that's the meaning. Of course, in the Chitta Matrins, mind-only school and schools below, depending on other, often is explained in terms of depending upon causes and conditions, right? Something that could not exist, does not exist without depending on causes and conditions, okay? But according to Prasangika Madhyamikans, without depending on another, it really kind of goes at another level, means without depending upon labeling or imputation by thought and concept. Okay, so that's what's the meaning is here in this particular context, and so we believe we superimpose that intrinsic reality onto things as if they exist in and of themselves without being imputed by thought and concept, right? And we think that is the ontological status of phenomena. If we ask, how do phenomena ontologically exist? How do they really exist, right? Ordinary languages, ontology seems such a big word, right? How do they really exist? Tell me, please, right? Well, because from our belief system, we think that they exist intrinsically, objectively, in and of themselves, without being imputed by the conceptual thought. Okay. Do they exist in that way? No. Hypothetically speaking, yes, right? So that's the thing we are dealing with here.
that depends on them. That depends on that tabale in the do to it. In a core, the tablet in the do tablet goes you can in the dunya stand Yomara. Or Tinajing on the church had in the Toba Konobata, have they might use it. Need Toba only about hit back again, Koran thing the Savage. And Tagway do the jukebox is near Jayomars. You are that Tagway do that, and one is doing it in the Chavayomares go. Toba doesn't jukebox Geshe and the Chavayo Chavali together until that hero, Karsa. That the tiny Shiva Chavas I didn't do it. Till the tiny summer he may say the Sango, that Tagway do that dream with the tiny semi new or what I would do my own. That dream on it, I think, is the Toba was saying, but the Queen Chivarity. Only the tiny way she will cause the same new Yomaraco, so Jayata took down a Kanka Yeza, Shajiti or what did it change Mado? Lucia, don't you what is
So at the bottom of page 212, top of page 213, an example is given to demonstrate the key idea here, to illustrate. So the idea here to demonstrate is what does labeling mean? How does it work? Right? Because everything is merely labeled, right? Nothing exists intrinsically in and of itself without depending on another mean conceptual designation. Okay? So the example given is that of a coiled rope that looks like a snake, right? Somebody sees there is a snake, okay? But it's a misperception. You just simply believed it's a snake, but it isn't. And how do we know? You just go and look into that every part of the coiled rope, there is nothing snaky about it. Well, it may look snake, but that's my English word, new, snaky about it. Sounds good, right? So, you look in every part of that coiled thing, which you originally thought is a snake, there is nothing to be found as a snake in that, okay? So it's simply labeled as a snake. Oh my God, that's snake. And then you go like, no, it's not snake, right? It's just a label, all right? And so this is how, all things are merely labeled, conceptual label, but if you try to find the imputed phenomena, what is label? There is nothing substance in the objects of what, this is me, just like you said. No, there's nothing to be found. Just like we cannot find snake in the coiled rope, we cannot find what is imputed onto things as something essential there, right? There isn't one, okay? And now somebody can say, you know what, yeah, but the coiled rope misperceived snake is a fake, right? These days we have a lot of fake things, right? So that makes sense. But what about the real snake? You know, the real snake is computed snake, and the fake snake is called snake. But there's a difference between the fake and the real, although both are called snake or perceived, right? Isn't there a difference? Yes, there's difference. So the difference we find is in the case of a real snake that is perceived and imputed as snake, what is happening is that, you know, as we look through things we talked about a long time ago, I guess, you know, that real snake being called snake is not challenged invalidated by any other valid conventional perceptions, isn't it? Okay? There isn't any other valid perception that challenges that very notion where we call the real snake a snake. So therefore, that snake is a real snake. It can poison you. It can strangle you, whatever it can do, because it can function as a snake. That's why it's real. It functions as, you know, performs the snake functions, you know, whereas the fake snake cannot do that. But in terms of labeling each of them as a snake, it's exactly the same thing. Okay? In terms of how we label something, it's the same. Whether you label what you thought as a real snake and you label it as a snake, and you see a real snake and you label snake, it's exactly the same thing. In terms of labeling, it's the same. Of course, they are not exactly the same in all respects, you know. All right, Gisela was smiling and chuckling there. I guess he said, well, we'll stop there today, and we welcome your questions. And let me write this down, volume number 3, page 212. 213, okay, 213 top. We welcome your questions. Oh yeah, there. Yeah, I think it's on.
Okay. So, Geshe, our minds are so tricky.
Mm-hmm.
And they're always playing it's always playing games on us, on me. How do we know that we've really come to that understanding of what is the root of the tree?
Mm-hmm.
Because every time you think you're there, and then you're not, and then you think you're there, and then you're not.
Uh-huh.
How does one know really that you've gotten to the root of the tree?
Sure.
The root of the
Right, samsara, yeah.
ignorance, right?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Morang kandi shwedi direken da karshu kure da nganzo ki karshu kure da sem ne da ro de wa gen ji log da mang bo shi bu ye be son da ka de ne go go jang te ding ge wa gen da ben da da gen di sun go yo wa da ben na ane xing dong ji gu ge me de za wa ne jie go lo wa da za wa de mun ji jie gu wa gen xin din nan xin da当时嘛哩不早晚的我接个那俺这当我接就搞了呀，他的这些什么的搞了，也免定个吃了哇个，是真的说我这也不对嘛了，也的这些什么的免定个吃了哇个，我呢一不得看着差不多过了啥，但我呢你个早的嘛是这确实来吃了哇个，一不得看来我是俺这老到忙到吃了哇个，免不晓得嘛都一不得。
好这是，他这时候的，就当他熊些东西，那别说这个，可是去年的活动些。说这个比什么当农村这些，是吧？是农村的感觉，就说是上班的，现在搞不是那个，是吧？原来现在经常就就那个就是俺这小伙是吧？我底下当的看那个我现在写的，你要过去他就当看过说呢，你现在他过印度的这就现在现在搞多是吧？是的。노래야 힘이 무엇을 원래 깔리시다 이러시고 다르와
저장 딱랑 눈진 투부터 하고부터 근데 저러서 다 깔려
이거 됐다 그게 빼셔도 되는 파샤와 다 최신경이 시와 소소 삼옥당 봐 숨기를 챈다 속도 세야 되다 풍부된 이유사다 내제를 비질 인사를 했습니 다 소소 문제 알아 봐 다들 문제 니마도 소소 target이 알아다 비질 다 라마다 수질 돼
Geshe recognizes the challenge we all find. You know, how do we know that we have identified the root of the tree, or in this particular case, the root of ignorance? You know, But that's the challenge, that we have to individually face. There's nothing that a Lama can give us a gift of that, like, hey, here is it. So it's all based upon many things, like, okay, so it depends upon the explication of the issue by the Lama, whoever's teaching, right? How clear he or she is about that. It also depends upon we as listeners, do we decode the message exactly just the way it is stated in the textbook and the Lama said it. So once we have got that, we have encoded and decoded message properly, then we have to go back to our own life experiences and verify, right, rectify that. Is this how exactly is happening with me or not, right? And so some of the situations, moments that we have been recommended to look at, we might get a better sense of that intrinsic self grasping is when we are very excited, when we are very scared, maybe he didn't say maybe very depressed too, I'm getting sad, right? That sense of I, the intrinsic self, seems to pop up, quite a bit, because we feared I'm going to lose my life in this dangerous situation, or that we just couldn't handle it. It's too much happiness, excitement, I'm freaking out here, right? So that freaking self, maybe that's the easy way to call it. The freaking self needs to be looked at like, okay, what is being freaked out here, right? And so it takes a lot of experiences. But at the end of the day, we have to go back to our own experiences and verify exactly as taught here. Read the book again, right? Again, if we need clarification from the teacher, we do. And then we go back and check with our life experiences. And hopefully that slowly, we will be able to get a glimpse of what it is. As we said this many times, the difficulty we have is to be able to identify that grasping. Intrinsic reality. Once we get it, it's easy to know that it doesn't exist. The absence of intrinsic reality is easy to understand. It's just, accurately identifying that is our challenge. So it is a combination of teaching, decoding the teaching properly, going back and verifying with our experience and all of that. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
J. Rinpoche says that according to Buddha Palita, and he concurs with that Shravakas and Pratika Buddhists realize the selflessness of persons and selfless objects as well.
Yes.
That is the lack of intrinsic existence. Right. But then it's been troubling me on page 122. If you refer to, I know Geshe doesn't have that, but I'm sure he knows that quote. 122.
Oh, 122. Okay.
Yes, all the way back. It says Chandrakirti's explanation.
120, excuse me, I'm a little bit slow here. Okay, where are you?
There's a quote from Chandrakirti.
Yes.
Also, Chandrakirti's explanation of the middle way says that Shravakas and Pratika Buddhists following Hinayana tenets are inaccurate because they apprehend an essence in things as form. Therefore, they do not know even the selflessness of persons, let alone the selflessness of objects.
Yes.
This is because they hold conceptions of the aggregates at the basis that is designated as the self. Okay. So that seems to contradict that, right?
Yeah. Hopefully I get a justice to translate it back into Tibetan. The Quran condition they did again. The Tiring also was another than the Roman Sanje Jangi Shunglet and Jerumje de Sheshana Kanda. The Niran the guys in Vain again, and a Karsore, Tony top to good again. Nakasata Dirwagan, Tangzin, Kansak, Tangzin, the Church, Tanzania Pangares again. It on top of Tugus Lover again. Did Duji in Vainas, the Kazangima marching on the Sons again. The gang Chabi the Yamada did again, then the Inji Kishun, the Jada Nishani, the Warred again. That didn't need a couch later again. Did again, then the then the Oma Jubena Roga, Roman Dawara with the next song the wagon. The Kavalina. That Nienda the Rangeni this Rogan. That type of member give do that in the Yores. Just a concert the Zimba de Takar Norris again. The current studio called Church Tamjel Yang and I can't appreciate the Nimbu men and Nimbu Yoba Zimbres. The songs are any Casorek. And Kansaki Tamedia comes to talk to a Yoma Rest again. Nimbu Yoba Zimber again. The current studio Kanlia. 가서 뒤로와게 단다 다 닥세기 풍부주여와게 다 풍부디 진데 열스거서와게 어디 랍샤다 디다 피기 랍다 디링이 게다셔서 게샬 가드티야
다 엄마 르숨세야 되라 제가 디디 ene niran shwe de me ma do na na chung som phang ro ti si ta niran da jwa shwe da khansa da me do ba ma do da ene da yi phom ba da hin su mo shi de ba jo ro wa o ti pha ta se dang go ta ke si niran ene to yi to me na ene go da chwa shag ma res da chwa ma ja ga khansa dang si pa yo ma ras khansa dang si ma da chwa ma be do ma ga he leng ro 어, 또 태화 섬여로 엄마 르숨세 어디 인사래. 어디 파다게 그래다. 담에 뭐도나 가자 풍부 되면 뭐도 좀 섬주도 쓰기로 가자 담에 또 세던 게도 도스. 어디 좋아.
So Geshe feels that that whole section is actually I think the argument against those who hold the view that Sharvakas do not realize the selfness of a person. They cannot be free. So then the arguments, if that was the case, right, and I think they make 3 different cases that, so that means the Sharvakas will still have grasping at aggregates as being the self, so they can never be free, so that wouldn't work, so it's a 3 kind of a hypothetical sort of case labeled against them. So, yeah. Any other thoughts?
Well, let me ask then.
Yes, sure, yes, please.
Well, time and again, we hear that positive. All the phenomena are positive through the force of an awareness or consciousness. Now, it sounds like as though things would not even appear without being imputed. It sounds as though being imputed precedes the very appearance of things. I mean, this is really what we're getting. If things at bottom are mere imputations, that means that really this is the foundation for their appearance.
Right.
So that means that first we impute, first there is a conceptual consciousness, only then things appear to our sensory consciousness. Things are reversed.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Kuna kandi shamba shu shu je again. Ta tinin di shimbo wa ta tang tang zo rangxin zhuba rangan zhuba de yomar se de kan zaro again. Ane kalso pige tanda 先了马甸巴啥叫个，他以前给大把了马甸巴，然后呢要么算叫个，这老大车位呢，安尼当当俺这个鱼刚刚是哪用过了个，哪我的眼的里呀，把多块大把的眼着光了，小多是个，多块把大了吧，大呢现在哪定了吧，看是马大不确实要么了个，这个大我。比个多把大一点眼了些，人把他么说个，多把大呢，你现在说哪定眼了是个，你那一般那说个。
他都不大的那些呢，他。
刚才马大不确定要嘛了个，马大不确定就搞了，马大不确定能就没得了吧？多把大呢，你大把的眼些，俺说那我是。
看这有这康萨这边打黑金下去，老吃个是吧？
那。
黑金是老吃的，看这些，这黑金来说啥个，多把这个别老吃的，我他个让黑金人嘛，都这个黑金他都看这是澎湖顶子呀，他先把这呢。 ene leji niya mindo as se to go leji yuji de to ba khona ta ga tha ga ran yo cha cha go le se de ba
so ken ken shuwa tan de ro ken pena de ken di kheba sho ro pena to ba li ya na ba de ro ken pa ngel ta ne ro ken ni chu su na ba de ro ken to me li ya na de ken di ta ba de ma de su na ge de kheba yo ro ma ken
to me la ta se na de be se mi se yo
ma pena ke phumje mi shal phumban nang yo ro ken di 품질 떡하게 품바시 따하게 김쟁기 품질 명시할 품바나 그래 마다네 거라 품바나 되고 가져 왔다 되로 저거시는
되게 지도 되시고 다 최탑지도 떡에서 디 지가르스네 품질 미기 품바데 샤토 왔다 품바데 품질 미기 당섬데 샤그러 와
어디 떡바다 벌게 땡기지 말고
데다 저다도 떡에다 딱섬도 요마다 거기
안 어떤 낭주 품바데 떡바다 서 봐
어떻게 되고 어디 되고
그래서 코나 라베 따다 되거게 녀로 떡바다 안 되네 시나 되게 저거다 떡바다 떡메 이가로
세는 되게 되고다 간저 유드 마유 쳐 망보 열어
나래
쳐 뒤에 간고 lokbe 떡바 유드 레요 말아
나래
이나 쳐 뒤에 유다도 간저 떡바 유드 춥 떡바 좀 쳐 뒤에 좀 이지 그런 주의도 뭐 요 말이야 저러 와 팀이 떡바 되지 뭔지 간가 지금 따고야 돼 아요 딱저 또 버려 레칸 진짜 따도로 자 강사 타대비 신는데 다 강사 레레가 예 또베 쉬어도 따도 뭐라지다
알레 지난 지금 다 사회는 거다
제나 저 유도 마지막 쉬어도 예 또베 따서 레게 왔다 가지 가르스 그 유코나들이 매로 또바 현다 당게들 직방 예 또바 니 직방해라 봐
그래
tindeji mo tinde batsen niya me jigba shara
라로와
wa diji
타인의 수 나야들 이제 또 봤다 방향 로고 걸고
da tobe noya de la da no da tobe da tinyosu jigo gore tinyosu
Yeah, because I'm trying to get the kind of a simple answer to your question precisely, whether thing appear to us after things have been imputed as thing, But Geshe things maybe they just happen simultaneously all at the same time. So when we talk about labeling or talk about taba, right? It doesn't have to be the case like each of us has to label a particular thing. If things are already labeled by X, Y, Z, whatever, right? There's a lot of things that are not objects of our conceptions right now, but they do exist. They have already been labeled. So from that point of view, we said that there is nothing that has not been labeled that's existent. Yeah. So I think he thinks simultaneous, the labeling and the appearance. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Well, if not, we'll stop. Yeah, one more.
Last week, I think that this relates to
Sure.
Yeah, last week we talked about how our hearts,
Yes.
our hearts after they realize emptiness, they
Yes.
Everything appears just the way it appears to us, but they know that it's unreal. Now, what happens? Why do they know that? Why do they have that conviction? Why is it not enough for us just to read in a book or hear from a teacher that? Yet we don't have that. So they must see something during that process of meditative equipoise on emptiness that convinces them. They know how phenomena are imputations or illusory.
Yes.
So that relates to both.
Good question. Yes. Korakani shweji dirige ta kazan di kanam ro ta pena dirwa ken ta chachom barwa nirang chachom ba gi ta nyamsha ge nega sol ya ta kasa ta tembang mo to charwa ge ina ta chedo shwe de kan che tamje rangshin ruba tembar ruba gan namon sinang gyor sum barwa ge ina di gyuma ta bo yima ta konje kendi go sla ba but kendi nega ka ba to ina sa bana gan zo cha sha wena ta gen zo kunde sung jo shwe ne ba che tamje gyuma ta bo res di ko sle de ro ge a ta gan shi kalsa go ta develop go ro ge di ko di sam gi pengyo ma ro ge gyuma res ro ba konje be 비게 가사다 제도 군내가 소야 최첨제 대발나야 대발매바 규마따고 나토야디 냠샤 군내가 소리야 콘솔이 좀 믹서를 냠녀로 가르치고 나서 거라게 이 용토야 가서로 많이 봐 가서 계시는 시도야 여러분 규마따고로 와 있네 다 가서 그 냠녀도 요 말하게
아지 대들에 간자도 다 고하심 콘서트 냠녀고 저는 그게 가르사다 pero por ejemplo se ve ¿no? Ende 좋아데 냠ഞ്ഞ고 저 코나 매일 해야 매버 저 지금 냠ഞ്ഞ고 좋아요 말에 어디 또 이것도 저는 간서 맨날 냠ഞ്ഞ도 걸레그러 왔다 pero 간서 락바신데 되거다 간서 페나 다도 희고를 때에나 간서 희고 때는 소소 그게 지시 차상을 지난 거 알지 과지 수미에 뭐 맞아 지고 그게 우리 오늘서 동들에서 힘하다 요 말아
네
디고 소소 냠뇽 줘요라.
네.
어디나지다 돈이 그게 랑신 주베 똥바디 또서에서 인 지도를 그 땅에 대만나서 이는 뭐 진짜지 그 나는 걸 셴바르디 게 그게 시자는 매우 차도라.
그렇죠.
비로 너 유마켄스 메베.
나오.
어디지 봐라.
No. So Geshe feels that that's basically because of their profound that non-conceptual experience, insight into emptiness. But the power of that, in the post-meditation period, those things appear to them as intrinsically existent like for us, but they have, by the power of that realization, things appear to them like an illusion. I mean, maybe the example that might work with us is like, when we look into the mirror, right, we see our face there. But at least we have a knowledge that, well, that's a reflection of my face. My face is not in the mirror, right? We kind of know that, right? So they have that sense that they've experienced, right, the ultimate nature of the phenomena. So in the post-meditation period, that helps them, right? The experience helps them. Because we have listened to the teaching, we have intellectual knowledge about that, but we don't have the experience, so therefore things don't appear to us as illusion, Yeah. Any other questions? I don't want to rush off anything. I like it so much. So I can skip the lunch today.
Yes.
Don't I get permission for Geshe to stop there? I have 3 announcements to make. I believe 3. In the
Yes.
February 10th, Saturday, we have asked for volunteers to help us to do the cleaning of the Gomba and prepare for the Lunar New Year. We call it Tibetan New Year, but that's also Vietnamese Chinese New Year, February 16th. So as we're preparing for that, so it's a new. If you have already given your name, we appreciate it. If not, if you would like to add, please contact. It says Christine Pham. Give your name. So it's February 10th, Saturday at 10. So we need your help. How many hours you could help? That's up to you. So that's one. I'm going in a chronological order here. February 13, Tuesday, is our kind Geshe Tsulim Gyeltsen, the founder of this center's anniversary. So there will be special talk offering, Gana Chakra, right? So talk offerings where we come together, pray, and we bring fruits and bless them and share them. So it will be at 7:30. So February 13, Tuesday, 7:30. Will be the anniversary of Geshe Tsulim Gyeltsen talk offerings. So you're welcome to that. My last announcement today is the New Year Losar invitation here. New Year is on February 16th, Friday. And as most of you know, that we come together and pray for the long life of His Holiness Dalai Lama and our other teachers. We wish each other, New Year. And it will be at 7 a.m. And usually we serve you light breakfast after a very short ceremony here for the new people. So everybody's welcome. February 16th, Friday. So let's call it a Lunar New Year, right? It's a Tibetan Losar, the Vietnamese Losar, the Chinese Losar, and I don't know who else Losar. So 3 announcements. Okay. So we will do the prayers in Tibetan and English and in Vietnamese. Kange lo de tim nye tin de nyin da nam da rab se ve chi nye de gu chi shi se che ni je do ga le bam kang da se ve zhen ra ma ri men do dong ye ye se ro zo gun la bu ji da ze yan la zhu zhi yang de zhu da xie zhou nie mo nie lo le ye zhang zhou zhe ze ma ri men ze dong ye niu wu qi nie chun ze ra zhe de ne da jie sa ju ta se yun de lun zuo ye se du zhu zha zhu dan zhu ni yan de da lu me yang lan de o ma ra ba za na di 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 Omara maza na de senden kye kera vese ye dalu temo memba rase kada tenje shunglo toba lo de bawe na wa sendo lo de jazu udon bega de kesan kongwe chudo memba tenba zinla wando yisho be changye shogun page 21. Obeisance to my Guru and Protector Manjushri, who holds at his heart a scriptural text, symbolic of his seeing all things as they are, whose intelligence shines forth as the sun, unclouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of Father for his only Son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You whose dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dharma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and free us from the iron chains of our karma, who wields the sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance. You who have been pure from the beginning, who have completed the stages achieving the highest perfection of a bodhisattva, whose princely body is adorned with 112 marks of a Buddha, I bow down to you, Manjushri. Om Arabhata Na Di. O compassionate one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind. Enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. 31. Like the sweet perfume of white lotus, born in the ocean of knowledge, nourishing honeybees, the fortunate beings, your fame pervades all directions. You are proficient and powerful in upholding the precious doctrine. To you, O Lobsang Tenzin Wangda, respectfully I pray.
Nhất tâm kính lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, bậc đại trí ngài điều phục hai chướng ngại, tựa nhật quang lan tỏa khắp mười phương, bậc thực chứng chân nghĩa màu rốt ráo, từ tim ngài Bát Nhã Kinh thủ hộ nhiệm màu, cõi luân hồi chúng sanh thọ nghiệp báu, bị ngăn che bởi phiền não vô minh, sở hữu 60 pháp âm thù thắng, cùng đại bi ngài hóa độ chúng sanh, tựa từ mẫu chăm lo cho quý tử. Tiếng rồng vang ngài thức tỉnh hữu tình, thoát khỏi vòng luân hồi nghiệp báu, gươm trí tuệ ngài chặt đứt vô minh, tận diệt muôn vàn khổ đau cùng ách nạn. Trường tử Như Lai tối thắng toàn giác, ngài an trụ nơi thập địa pháp vân. Đê đầu đảnh lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, cúi xin ngài tận diệt tánh chướng vô minh. Om Arapasanadi. Con khẩn cầu dưới gót sen bậc đại trí, ban pháp lực diệt phiền não vô minh, được trí sáng con thâm nhập nghĩa màu, pháp vi diệu cùng muôn vàn luận giải. Như diệu hương ngọt ngào từ sen trắng, đàn xanh nơi trí thù thắng đại dương, hàng thiện căn như ong mật thọ nương, hồng danh ngài khắp mười phương quảng bá, đấng thiện xảo uy dũng bảo tồn pháp bảo vô giá. Nam mô Lobsang Tenzin Wangdak, xin cung kính trì niệm.
Sanje Jindo Media Viva Yen Dowe Nanda Shin Cheba Jo Kanri Rabe Gobe Shingan De Pendang De Wa Ma Lu Jongwe Jianre Zi Wang Tenzin Jiangzo Ye Xiabe Si Den Bado Den Yun Ji Yi Dan Guru Rana Mande Log Ni On Da Amen.